This is the last video you'll ever see of me living in Seattle, and in this video I'm explaining to you why I'm leaving Seattle and also give you some tips that I've learned about moving in general. But before we begin, a little bit of backstory. I am a Canadian citizen. Right after school, I got an offer to come to work in the States as a software engineer full-time. Don't get me wrong, I do not regret the decision whatsoever, but I remember at the time it being really hard. And the reason for that is because, to be honest, it was kind of scary. My whole entire family is in Canada. On top of that, at the time I had a very, very long-term girlfriend. I don't know why I'm saying it like that. We're still dating, but I have a very long-term girlfriend that wasn't going to be moving with me. So because of that, I was almost living 1 foot in, 1 foot out the entire time I was in Seattle, because I knew in the back of my mind that, okay, this is not a place I can stay long term. I'm going to move home eventually. The friends I make, the things I do, the hobbies I pick up, like all of this is going to go away. It's all temporary. Because at the time of moving, I didn't know how long I was going to stay in Seattle. I just knew that it wasn't going to be a long time. And then it ended up being 3 years. And then Seattle was the first time where I was like more alone than I normally would be. You know, that experience taught me a lot about myself, what I like, what I don't like. So all these things are kind of coming to a head where I feel alone in Seattle. I don't have a community here. I'm like 5,000 kilometers away from my family, from my girlfriend. And instead of facing the issues that I have in Seattle about not having friends, not having community and building that, I'm just like, oh, I'm just going to go fly to LA or fly to Toronto or fly to New York and just kind of avoid the problem. And it's been hard for me to even like progress in a self-development kind of way. Like, you know, how often do I post YouTube videos? Even though it's something that I know that it's important to me to do, like I don't do it often because of this continually like, oh, I'm picking up, dropping off, picking up, dropping off. And it's just completely destroyed my routine. Any semblance of I had a routine. Like I haven't gone in the gym in like 2 months. It'd be a little bit enough of a backstory to understand my motivation here, but let me get into the really nitty gritty of why I need to move. I realize I just really need to shake it up. Like mentally, like I've just not been in the right place. I've just been like rut after rut. So I think that, you know, a fresh start would be a really good opportunity to just, you know, really make habits and make a routine to get out of that. And I know it's kind of a cop out to move because no matter where you go, you're there. I can't remember who said that, but it's like moving and being somewhere else or like traveling is not going to help you escape your problems. The problem's with you. But I do think having a fresh start is a really good way to mentally unblock yourself. Now that fresh start doesn't actually have to be literally moving, but like physically having a fresh start, I'm sure will help you as well. And I've kind of copped out by doing that. Now, another reason that I'm moving is to be way closer to home. So like I said earlier, like my girlfriend, we've been dating for a really long time and she lives in Toronto. So that's another big reason why I'm moving back home. The family thing as well. Like your parents are only getting older nowadays. So been talking a lot about building a community and planting roots. And I think that closer to home is eventually where I'll need to be, because I know that when I want to start a family, I'll want to be closer to my family. And just by the way, like if you're wondering where I'm going to move, I'm pretty sure you can guess based off of the vibes. Give you a hint, the rent is very expensive. But aside from all the nature, like I think I've seen what I needed to see in like the actual Seattle city area, and I'm ready for a shakeup. I'm ready to see some new stuff. And I guess the last reason I'm going to be moving away is because you only really do live once. Like I get wrapped up in like the future planning of things and just looking at it from like a risk aversion and being conservative with my risks type of way. But you only really do get to live once. And if there's something that you want to do or you've been thinking about doing it, you can only look at numbers and plan for the future as much as you can. But at a certain point, like you just have to make the leap of faith, so to speak. So I guess that's kind of the last motivation for me wanting to move. Now, some things that I've learned and what is actionable for you, the viewer watching, especially if you've moved. Number one is that moving is kind of hard. Like I think that everyone really glamorizes moving and getting away from your family and like exploring a new city, etc. But they don't really talk about how difficult and how lonely it can be sometimes. Maybe you're just built different, but for me, this was like a truly humbling experience. Like there are times where I just wanted to go home so bad and like literally just have a home cooked meal, but I couldn't because I was 5,000 kilometers away. And this experience of me living alone has made me respect people who move away for school so much more, especially international students. Kudos to everyone that's done that. Now, the second thing that I learned is that making friends is kind of really difficult. Maybe this is just a me thing, but when I moved here, I found it extremely difficult to make friends. Maybe it's the city or maybe it's me, but you really got to try hard. Like in a way that you just wouldn't have had to do it in the past. Even if you take the conventional advice of like, oh, go make a hobby, go play a sport. Like, yeah, you could go play a sport, play like this basketball, great example. You play basketball with a guy a couple times. Just seeing them at basketball is not enough. Like in order to make a longer lasting friendship, you have to like take them to a second location, which is kind of weird to say. Again, this definitely could be a me thing because I traveled so much and like I knew like mentally that I'm like, oh, I'm going to leave soon, blah, blah, blah. Or at least I kept telling myself that. So I didn't put that much work into making friends, but I had a pretty tough time making friends here. But don't get me wrong, over the past couple of years, I've met some people that I would consider very good friends now. Like it wasn't easy. It was definitely an uphill battle for me at least. But I think that the most actionable advice for people who are moving away and moving to a new city, my advice is to really just, you have to buy in. Even though it seems silly that you think that you're only going to be here for like a year or 2 years, 3 years, like you're still going to have to be here for 1, 2, 3 years. Like you might as well have a good time while doing it. Looking back, I really wish that I had just put in a little bit of extra time when I was living here to enjoy it more now that I'm leaving. Even though I think it could be hard to buy into where you're at, I think it's important to remember that wherever you leave is not going to stay exactly the way that you left it. So for example, for me, I left Toronto and I thought that when I came back, everything would be the same, but it wasn't. All my friends are no longer hanging out because they all got jobs, right? It makes sense. And then, you know, all the hangouts aren't the same. People are doing different things. People are moving on, which is how life goes. But if you don't buy into the place where you're currently living, like I didn't, in Seattle, like now you feel like you're not home when you're in Seattle. But when you go back home, like it doesn't feel like home either because everything's changed. So home doesn't feel like home anymore. And where you live doesn't feel like home anymore because you haven't bought in. So you're kind of like in this limbo state. That's definitely how I felt over the past couple of years. Now, just because you're buying in doesn't mean that, you know, you're going to completely remove the idea of moving back home or doing whatever, but it's just making the investment into the place that you spend like literally majority of your time is going to be more beneficial for you. Like now that I have my friends here, I'm very confident that in a few years, I'll still be friends with them even though I've moved to a different city. It's not like you're wasting your time, which I think a lot of the time that I spent in Seattle, I felt like I was doing. Now, I want to acknowledge a lot of these issues that I'm talking about that I've had personally are definitely champagne issues. Like on the grand scheme of things, the things that I'm talking about are so minuscule in comparison to having a roof over your head or food on your table. Again, like that's not to diminish, you know, the problems that you may or may not have when moving, but it's important to note that like if you're moving for a greater opportunity, you have to acknowledge that there has to be some sort of sacrifice along the way. For some people, that will be a big sacrifice. For others, not that much. Like maybe they hated living at home. Now, through all this ranting, you might think that I hated Seattle or my time here, which is completely not the case. I really did like living in Seattle for the time that I was here. Seattle itself is not that nice, but the surrounding area is honestly beautiful. I think the best that you'll get in all of North America, and maybe I'm a little bit biased. Man, like the mountains here, the hiking here, it's just waking up, seeing the ocean, seeing like the mountains every day. It's insane serotonin boost. And on top of all the things I've seen while in Seattle, I've been able to take advantage of such a great opportunity to be able to invest so much at such a young age. And I'm extremely grateful for that opportunity. Like if you told me where I would be at when I was just graduating university, I would just not believe it. Or even started university, I would not believe the amount of progress that I've made, not even financially, but just as a person. And I attribute a lot of that financial and as well as personal development from living in Seattle and getting outside of my comfort zone. With that being said, even though Seattle's been very good to me, I think it's time for me to turn a new leaf and, you know, get back to packing. Look how much stuff I got. Still so much. I definitely don't think I'm alone in my thoughts here. And I think a lot of people suffer from things in a similar sort of way. So if that's you, feel free to hit me up some way, somehow. I do have a Discord. It's free. I don't sell anything. Feel free to join that. But aside from that, if you liked the video, please consider liking and subscribing. I will let the YouTube algorithm overlords recommend one of these videos for you to watch for me today.